From the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, this is the SDM Show with your host, Rob Cairns. The SDM Show focuses on business, life, productivity, digital marketing, WordPress, and more. Sit back, relax, grab your favorite drink, and enjoy the show. Here is Rob.
Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. I'm the founder, CEO, and chief creator of Amazing Ideas at Stunning Digital Marketing. In today's podcast, I celebrate episode 200. This has been an amazing journey, and when I started podcasting, I never thought I'd get this far. I want to celebrate all the people that have listened, contributed, both on air and off air, with comments, criticism, ideas, and more. Thank you to all the people who have been on this podcast as a guest. You are so much appreciated, more than you will know. And more importantly, thank you to all you who have listened to each and every episode. I really celebrate you and I appreciate you so much. For episode 200, I sit down with my good friend Bob Dunn, Bobwp, and we talk about WooCommerce, Bob's specialty. And there's no more fitting person than Bob to be on this podcast for 200 because, frankly, he's one of the big inspirations to why I started this 3.5 years ago to start with. So sit back, relax, grab a drink, and enjoy the podcast that Bob and I recorded for you. Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. Today I'm working on a really special episode 200, and my guest is Bob Dunn of Bobwp and Do the Woo fame. How are you today, Bob?
Hey, I'm doing good, and actually, it's a pleasure being here, and it's an honor, number 200. Hey, I feel very special.
Oh, you are. We've talked many times over the years, and we've had a long time friendship. And I think I've told you one of the biggest reasons I got into podcasting a long time ago was your inspiration. So I have to thank you for that. So
Oh well, hopefully it didn't inspire you in the wrong direction.
no, I don't. I don't think so. We're both still here. So let's kind of. I was going to ask you, and I don't think I've ever asked you, but I will. Why did you get into podcasting originally?
I think it was, and I'm going to kind of blame Matt Medeiros in a way
Yeah.
because back in 2014, oh no, I won't blame him. I will blame two of my colleagues in 2009. Actually, somebody tried to poke me into it because, and this was right after I got into WordPress. They just were saying, "Hey, you got the voice for it, and you got the marketing experience, all this." So that was, kind of, I don't know, it was kind of between maybe a couple of the high rise of podcasting. But anyway, I said, okay, I'm going to mull on it, and it took me about 5 years of mulling on it. And then I remember Matt Medeiros kind of was around that time. He was doing his Matt Report, and he was poking at me, "Hey Bob, you got to do a podcast." And finally I gave in and did a podcast for a year called WP Breakdown.
Yep.
And it was such a piece of stuff. it was interesting. I would basically just do these little 10-15 minute, they were almost like tutorial type things. I was kind of regurgitating what I was writing on a podcast, but I thought, well, I'll do this. And I did it a year. And after a while, I just thought, man, is this really, is anybody, I mean, I had a few listeners and stuff, but I just didn't feel real confident with it. And I called it WordPress Breakdown because I was thinking I was breaking down WordPress, but then I thought, ironically, if somebody's having a breakdown over WordPress, maybe they'd listen to it. So I was trying to add a little bit of humor in there. But yeah, so after a year, or actually maybe 14 months, I dropped that one and then just said, okay, I'm not going to podcast again until I'm enlightened with an idea that just, I go, whoa, this is the thing to do. So then I waited again for about 2 years before I started up again.
Yeah, it's an amazing journey. And now you podcast all about WooCommerce pretty well. You found your spot in your niche, right?
Right. So yeah, and the nice thing is over time, organically, I have I'm a lot more into the production side of things, and I'm on it occasionally, but I have a lot of great co-hosts that carry the shows, and that has brought more voices to it, which I love.
It's been quite the journey, and it's probably, I don't know if it's the only WooCommerce podcast out there, but it's certainly the premier WooCommerce podcast out there. And as you've talked about over the years, it's not really a news podcast per se. Like, it's not kind of in competition with WP Minute or WP Mainline, two people that are both friends of ours. You're kind of more getting an in-depth interview than actually concurrent news, correct?
Right. And it's more of a mix of learning. It's like guys learning about and from other builders. So, you're
Yeah.
learning from other people that are doing what you're doing or what you're trying to do as far as building products or sites, around WooCommerce. So it's just more highlighting and elevating the people in the space versus news. I don't want to be a news site. There's plenty of great news sites out there that are doing their job. So, it's sometimes you intertwine news in a sense, but it's not based around news.
No, no question. Now, at the time of this record, we're sort of into 2022, and we've talked a lot the last couple of weeks, and I thought I'd ask you, what were some of the big highlights for WooCommerce and the WooCommerce space in 2021?
Oh boy, that's a good question because I think the two things that stick out to me are, I think the boost with WooCommerce itself, the boost with their payments, the Woo payments.
Yeah.
I think they really, put a fire under that to get that out there more and get it more geographically covered. And, so that, like, for Woo itself, I think that was it. And I think it was kind of the year of, maybe this is wrong and some people would argue with me, but the year of checkout. It seems like there was a lot of checkout, and it's just not during that year. It might have been a bit prior to that year too, but a lot of different plugins, SaaS products coming out around checkout. I think it's such a, it's a hard spot, and it's a spot that everybody wants to get down to an art for their customers. And I think that I just saw a lot of the people that were reaching out to me were or that. And then actually a third thing, just briefly say, I think it was the growth because of COVID. And then that kind of, even though it maybe leveled out a little bit more in 2021, I think it's still really growing. And in turn, that brought a lot more people externally from WordPress and WooCommerce into the space. And, it piqued their interest a bit more. And they thought, hey, I gotta get in on this WooCommerce thing.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the two things you touched on that really resonate is the checkout. And the reason I think that's been such a hotbed is one of the complaints of purchasers through e-commerce stores checkout processes. We all grumble. Why does it take me 10 steps? Why is it so difficult for the end user or the purchaser? Why does it take me 10 minutes to check out? I mean, so streamlining that process is really good. And I agree with, things about Woo increasing with the pandemic going on. I think, and I've been calling this for probably 10 years now. I've been saying time and time again, e-commerce is the future. Well, the future's now. And I think Amazon point and check. Why does everybody go to Amazon? Because it's easy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think where we're seeing it with even small businesses now, they're starting to realize if they're not selling online, they've got a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a big issue. And I don't think the trends are going to change after the pandemic. I think, it's so easy to sell online. So let's touch on something that I've got a big bone to peeve. And it's kind of companies that either charge separate for shipping or just build the shipping charge into the cost of the item. If you were running a Woo store and you're not, which way would you go?
Boy, that's an interesting one because I know personally, and maybe it's not because I'm cheap, but that no shipping, free shipping, and I compare prices too. I say, okay, is this product, what can I get it for over there? And sometimes I can see the difference, like in Amazon, when you're on Prime. Yeah, maybe it's still a good price, but it seems like it's been bumped up because everything's free shipping on Prime. If I had to do it, I would probably, and I'm not probably the best person to give advice on this, but I would, I would offer free to a point and then say, this is what shipping costs for. There's you know it right there. There's no hidden surprises. Whether that's some kind of flash shipping, I'm not sure. I don't know the logistics and the costs and everything, but I think I would have some enticement where, okay, at this point, yeah, there's no shipping, and I'm not going to worry about making up for a lot of it with my products. But there's going to be a point, and whether that's free shipping after this amount of a spend or whatever, or certain items. Again, it's all over the board. I don't, it's, I guess putting it in there is in there, but you kind of get a sense comparing prices if you that kind of a person that it is in there. So it's like, what's the point? Just
Yeah.
be honest with it. Just tell me, hey, this is what it costs to ship, and if it's worth it to me, I will pay the shipping.
Yeah, I know with me, I actually sit down and say, okay, what's the cost of the item? How many items am I buying? What's my shipping cost? And then if I'm ordering 2 items, I kind of divide the shipping cost by 2. And then I say, okay, so if it's $20 and it costs me $10 to ship it, I'm ordering 2 items, it's $25. And then I kind of move on and say, okay, and what is everybody else selling it for by the time I pay the shipping there? And I do that price comparison. Like I'm awful that way.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
And it's that. Um, at the time it's recorded, 5.9 is going to come out. By the time it's released, 5.9 will have been out. What do you see any big changes with Woo after 5.9 or WordPress or 6.0 comes out, or do you just see it kind of trucking ahead?
Just from talking to some of the people at WooCommerce.com and stuff, I think they're just going to, they're going to find ways to put their arms around full site editing and
Yeah.
blocks more and more. I think it's all going to, it's going to happen. I don't know when it's going to happen, what exactly it's going to look like. But I know when we were talking with Paul, the CEO there, he said that yes, they're embracing full site editing, and yeah, they're paying attention to this stuff, and they're going to find the best ways that Woo can be part of that. And I also think it's not a quick process either. A lot of their stuff has to be done in baby steps because there's just too much at risk to just start throwing stuff together. So they need to put stuff out a bit by bit and test and not just say, hey, we're suddenly this, we're all full site editing and blocks, welcome
Yeah.
to our world. So I think it's a slow process. I think it's inevitable that it's going to happen. It's just I'm not sure when we'll see it and what it will look like.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I mean, as you know, and most of my listeners know, I'm already all in with blocks. So I have successfully taken a website that was theme and page builder based and has gone to 100% theme and blocks based. I'm all in with Cadence. I have been for a while. But I'm not so sure even Cadence, the last I've read, is not fully FSE aware. It will be, but they've actually recommended in some blog posts maybe leave the FSE stuff, full site editing, turned off for now until things stabilize a little bit, because I think people are going to rush to 5.9. And personally, I think 5.9 is a feature release, not a security release. So I
Yeah.
think we need to take our time with that one just a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. It's it's going to be everybody's going to have to find their way into it, and I sympathize with all builders that, when these things happen, I mean, they've got to figure out what's best for them, what's best for their customers, and how they proceed, into the next phase or whatever. Or like you said, is it okay? We're going to get this all worked out, but don't everybody jump the gun at once.
Yeah, and I think one of the best resources is learn.wordpress.org right now. The learning team at WordPress is doing an amazing job. I know one of my colleagues, Courtney Robertson's on that team, and this is the first time that they've ever gotten a learning plan together before a release. So this is like really a big deal. And I think anybody who wants to learn a bit should jump on over to that site and try and learn a little bit, spend some time in the forums, spend some time reading, and kind of figure out where this is going to go, because I think it's going to be an interesting ride from a Woo standpoint, and even from just a regular WordPress standpoint. I mean, I think the block editor is an easier way to post blog posts, to be quite frank. It's not difficult. I think reusable blocks is a great way to reuse stuff. I've got multiple reusable blocks running around on my site, and the advantage of that is when you drop a block, then it just picks up the same content. So that's really useful. And I think it's an exciting time to be a builder, Bob.
Yeah, it is. And as far as resources too, I think that, and for those that are listening and haven't checked it out on Slack, on the Making WordPress Slack, they have I actually follow it, although I don't understand probably 90% of the stuff they're talking about, but it's a FSC outreach experiment channel on that. And if you want to stay on top of things and see what people are thinking about and what isn't working and what's working and stuff, I mean, I know it's a time suck, but also I'm amazed. I don't think you really understand what is going on in core until you sit in one of these Slack channels and get in on a chat or just kind of watch it, because it's phenomenal. It's just like, wow. I just think, these people are constantly, stuff is going on, and it amazes me. And then it basically ends up in a fruition of a release, and it's like, wow, all of this led up to that, and here we are.
It's funny. You mentioned the WordPress core Slack channels, and I managed to avoid Slack for the longest time. I stayed away. I avoided it, because the way I looked at it, honestly, it was just another way of a Facebook group, a Facebook chat, an IRC channel, whatever you want to choose. And then somebody said to me, and I think it was Jeff Chandler, actually, we were talking one day, and he reminded me that the WordPress org stuff is only on Slack. And it was like, okay. So I joined for Slack, WordPress.org. I'm in the post status Slack channel. And the last I looked this morning, I had 18 Slack channels going on. So choose your poison.
Yeah, exactly. I thought maybe you got on Slack because you knew that was the only way you can reach me pretty quickly. So, that
works too. Yeah. That works too. Now that's interesting. While we're talking about communication, and I'm going to have some fun with this one, you made a decision 6 months ago, at least, to get rid of what I call the Facebook monster. And has that hurt your podcast in any way, Bob? Or
that's a good question, because sometimes I think about that a little bit. I think I'll think of something and I'll think, well, should I have left Facebook because of this? Or I never really got a real active audience on any of my pages I created on Facebook, and that was partly my fault because I just couldn't spend my time there. It just I just it just didn't work. And I belong to groups and stuff on there, and that again was just I was always just like, oh, why am I even in there reading all this? And sure, you can pick up on a lot of stuff, and I think it's still it's viable for a lot of people, but there was just too much of a mix of everything. And for me, it really was towards the end, I think, more of a personal moral decision than a business decision, which maybe, some people might say that, it would have been a little tougher if my business would have been, like thousands and thousands of very active and stuff. I would have had a little bit more of a struggle, but I was in the position to let my personal decision say, I think Facebook really sucks and I don't like the garbage on it. That was it. Every time I get on there, all I'm thinking is, "Arr."
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I just finally made the decision. And, for me personally, I don't wave it like I'm the greatest person in the world because I did it. I did it because it worked for me and I just could not put up with it anymore.
No, I understand that. And, I call it the Facebook monster. For those who have listened, know I'm on a Facebook rant tear because I haven't been able to post anything from my business domain on Facebook or Instagram for the last 9 months and counting, by the way. So I made a decision. Well, back in October, I actually shut my Instagram account down. So I don't even have one of those. And I'm only on Facebook because I run a couple Facebook ads for a couple clients and I need access to the Facebook ad manager. And one of the things I've been doing, and, if people are unhappy with me, that's fine. I've been unsubscribing to all my Facebook groups with the exception of 10 of them right off the top. And I know my family's already ticked off at me because they're complaining that to go look at pictures, they have to go somewhere else. And I keep saying, that's nice. Because I haven't posted anything personal on Facebook in months. And it is so bad. In order to post my podcast on Facebook, I actually have to post a Castos page and not my website page, if you can believe that. So I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally relate to all that. My sister, I would occasionally talk with her. I could kind of see what she was, talking about and stuff like that. But it was like, and I know a lot of people are very tied to a family. They say I would quit everything except this is how I stay in touch with family. And, I get it. It's just sad that it has, I don't want to say trapped, but was built where people have to rely on it and they don't feel like there's no escape from it.
Yeah, I've just kind of minimized what I have to do on there, and that's about it. And I've kind of said, okay, beyond these things, I'm just not gonna do it. Moving on a little bit, at the time of this record, one of the big stories that's kind of hit the news wires isn't so much a woo story, but more a web story, is Australia just banned Google Analytics.
Did they?
And, yeah, they did. And it's been kind of all over the place. And I don't know how much people know, but Australia has been going after creators like Facebook and Google to pay for access to newspapers and publications for a long time. They've been instituting that. And in a lot of respects, I think Australia is more militant than the European Economic Union. Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's interesting because I did not know about that. And wow, that's almost that kind of explodes the brain a bit because it's interesting because I've pulled off from Google on a lot of stuff too myself, and apparently I'm not a country, but but yeah, wow, that I'm kind of at a loss for words there because that's it seems like exactly what it means. I mean, how it affects people. So you can't really, if they ban Google Analytics, that means you can't get any analytics from Australia, basically. Is that it?
Yeah, if you're doing Google Analytics, you're not supposed to collect the data using Google Analytics, which forces you to go to another analytics platform. So those in WordPress, one of the options is, whether you like it or not, is Jetpack Analytics, right? There are some third-party privacy-based analytics out there. I run one, and that's an option. I think it all has to do with this whole quorum we've gone through with cookies and We know the mess Apple's gotten into with Safari and Apple Mail blocking receipts and blocking opens and blocking all kinds of things. So, we've gotten into some of that already in North America. And I just think it's going to go on and go on, to be honest with you. It's getting
Yeah,
harder and harder.
yeah, that's interesting because I was just thinking, and how much do you value? How much do you need to know Australian analytics depending on your business?
Yep.
And do you look for alternatives? And it seems like even some of the alternatives in WordPress, as I recall, it seems like I was using one of the analytics, and you actually were. It seems like it was hooked up through Google somehow in a way, so that
Yeah.
wouldn't really help. But interesting. Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, it's okay. But I think the more interesting thing is going to be what the European Economic Community EU does, because we all know the EU's been on a privacy tear in the last couple of months, a little bit. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to see how far they take this mess. And I don't
Yeah,
think it's going to be good, to be honest with you. And I am dying to see how far Canada takes this mess, because they've already taken a stance with newspapers. So it's going to get sporting, to say the least, Bob. So
yeah. Interesting to watch.
as we move into 2022, what's the one thing you'd like to see them build into WooCommerce? And then my second part of that question is, does WooCommerce need a WordPress competitor in the space to make it improve itself more?
Let's see. On the first part, nothing really. I guess kind of going back to what we were talking about. I'm more curious to watch how Woo brings full site editor
Mhm.
and blocks into core more. And like I said, it is going to be a time over time, but I think that will be the most intriguing thing because it's like inevitable. So how do they do it? Because I obviously have no reason. As far as competition, I'm saying all for it. It's like I've had a couple competitors reach out. I've had one competitor to be very nasty to me too, but it's whether that will drive more innovation. It's a challenge because I know that in the past few years there was a few, and I'm not even I don't really want to name them, but they're not even coming to mind, that have entered the space, and they've they've talked to me, and I've had candid talks with them, and they've really struggled to get into the space. I mean, and some of them I don't hear about. I'm thinking there probably still exists, but obviously it's still been somewhat of a struggle. Uh, I I think that, yeah, I mean, I'm all for options, and the fact that I focus on WooCommerce is not because it's like I think it should be the only thing in the world on WordPress. It's just because of I've been in touch and worked with it and been part of it for many, many years. So yeah, I think it's cool. I know there's that one come out that a lot of people are um been talking about. Not a lot of people, but I hear more people. Oh, what's it called? Lemonade. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Lemonade.
yeah,
Yeah,
I've heard of it. Yeah.
yeah, and it's digital downloads. I believe it's specifically digital downloads, as I recall. I'm hoping I'm
Easy
not.
digital downloads. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm not. If I'm wrong about Lemonade, I don't know if it's Lemonade Stand or. Anyway, I'm sorry that I'm mutilating their name, but I know that there's several people that have been excited about it because they said, "Oh, here is an option to WooCommerce in in some way or other." And yeah, I'm like, I don't know if it's, some people say it's got to be done. Well, it's easier said than done. I mean, we can all say, yeah, to make competition and make the growth in the industry solid, this has got to happen. But what's the old saying, when the rubber hits the highway or whatever, it's like these people have, some of them have faced challenges doing this and trying to break into it. So it's obviously not the easiest task. I would like to say, yeah, I encourage it. I think it would be great. But on the other hand, I'm not going to say why aren't people doing it, because there's probably a lot of people maybe thinking they could do it, but they think, wow, is this going to work? Is this going to play out? So it's easy to say we want it. It's another thing to have somebody actually do it and be successful at it.
Yeah, it's so true, and it's not easy to build an e-commerce platform from bottom to up. I mean, iThemes tried it. They sold that product off to Ninja Forms, and it was called Ninja Shop, and it's basically a dead platform, and it's so hard. And the problem is, I think reason a lot of people go to Woo, honestly, is cost. I mean, yes,
Mhm.
there's a development cost, but here's your problem. If you go to Shopify, and I think Robbie Adair and one of your guests alluded to it on one of your recent podcasts
Yeah,
and said,
Zach and Robbie Baran.
Robbie, yeah, and you know where this conversation's going, and said if you start changing your payment processing, Shopify just charges you more money and boosts up your plan. Well,
Mhm.
before you're at it, you're at this $150 a month, and they say, oh, you can get started for $19.99. Sure, you can with nothing. So the problem with all these alternative platforms is you either pay up front for Woo development, or you pay on the back end for paying Shopify to get what you want.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, and it's really apples and oranges,
Yep. Yeah.
So it is, and it's I'm obviously one works better for the other for a lot of different people. So yeah, I think it's I would never say never it will happen or it won't happen, but I think with the growth of e-commerce, there's it seems obvious that there would be some that would try to find some unique ways to, inch themselves into grabbing some of the market. And it's a big market. So,
Yeah.
it's like, why is there another form plugin coming out? Why is there another SEO plugin coming out? Because it's a huge market and people are determined to grab a chunk of that. So,
Yeah, and sometimes 1% or 2% can be big dollars. Ask Google that with search, right?
mhm.
2% of search markets worth millions of dollars. So that's what people need to realize. So a couple months ago, you had the pleasure of going to New York City for State of the Word, and you
Mhm.
did this amazing do the Woo Train Clan deal where you got sponsors, great sponsors, and you went to New York. You did some dinners. Do you regret the experience despite the COVID concerns that came out of it? Was it worthwhile doing? Would you do it again? How do you
You
feel
know,
about that?
it was I don't regret it at all. I mean, it was probably one of the most unique experiences I've ever had in
Yeah.
ton of different ways. And it also proved to me how unique and interesting this community is, the WordPress community, because just all the things that happened and all the things that kind of played out as far as connections. And yeah, it was a phenomenal experience. I can't a lot of it I can't even put into words because I think somebody would actually have to live it. Do I regret it in the COVID type of way? In hindsight, yeah, things could have been done differently. That's all I can say. I mean, I was a poster child. I was on the front of that photo, so that goes around. But it's it happened. The big splurge or the splurge, I shouldn't even use that word. The big when it happened and hit the roof in New York was while we were there, and that's not an excuse, but it's yeah. I think that could have been done differently. And if anybody wants to say, who to blame, I don't know if there's really anybody specifically to blame, but in hindsight, yeah, I wish it would have been done differently. If if I was asked to do this again, um, I don't know if I'll ever step foot on a train again. To tell you the truth, for multiple nights, it was an experience. Let me tell you that, and there was a lot of fun to it. I mean, very few podcasters can say they did a podcast on a train, so I can, maybe that's a bucket list thing for podcasters or something. But I don't it was a very exhausting experience. It was very nonstop for me for 8 days.
Yep.
And it's one of those things that you say, well, no, I probably won't do something exactly like that again, except with the way my brain works. I can always come up with something else creative. I guess there's always ships or something. I don't know. But I wouldn't do that exact same thing probably again around the travel accommodations, just because it was very exhausting.
Yeah, it was hard. I think I've told you, I've done train travel where I've gone from Vancouver to Toronto, which is the Canadian. It's a beautiful run through the Rockies. And what I've always done is flown out to Vancouver and taken the train back. I've never done it both ways and I love train travel. And by the way, I can't get away without doing this. We have to mention our dear friend, Mr. Jeff Chandler, and do the woo for Jeff while we're talking about trains. Or
right,
I think Jeff would shoot the both of us.
Yeah, really. But and Jeff would, I mean, he would love that. And the adventure of it, it was like, there was a lot of things the sleeping was a challenge for me. I got through it. I'm not like, that didn't destroy the whole thing, because every moment I was awake during the day was phenomenal. So it's just, it just was a little bit challenging around that way. And, for me, that was me. I met another WordPress person coincidentally on the same, not only on the same train, but in the same car as me. And she does this all the time and she loves doing it. I know other people that have done it, and they, they'll travel and then they'll get off and stay overnight in hotels too, to kind of, break it up.
They break it up.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. Me, I thought of this thing, like 3 weeks before State of the Word, and I pulled together this crazy idea and just did it, not really knowing every aspect of it, how it would, the experience would be, but it was priceless in a lot of ways.
No, I would agree with you. It was an amazing journey. It was fun to watch it from afar. It was enjoyable. I think State of the Word, and we've talked about this since, I have never seen Matt as so energized as I did in State of the Word. He was energized past belief this time around. He was a little more personal than I've seen him in a long time. I mean, the hardest part is the poor guy goes to a WordCamp and he gets pounced on every time. I've had the pleasure of meeting Matt in Toronto many, many years ago. And what I remember from that experience was the after party after the official event was more fun getting to know Matt than the official event. But I think he was good. I mean, he was really good, and it's been a challenging year. And I think he's held it together pretty well, to be honest.
Yeah, he was certainly in his element. Yeah, he was enjoying the smaller group and the conversations, and I think just being able to kind of talk with some WordPress people a little bit more on a more personal level.
Yep. And so 2 more things I want to get into before we wrap up, and I'm sure they're going to cause a little bit of controversy, and people are going to look at me. People are going to look at me and said, "Why again?" So the first one is this whole discussion: should open source people be paid? And we all know what's been going on in the post status Slack around that discussion for the last couple of weeks, and we all know outside of the WordPress space what's gone on with Log4j and the whole server hacking side and open source. And now there's big people like Microsoft and Google having that discussion with the U.S. government. What's your feelings on that, Bob? Do you have any that you want to share?
It's kind of it's more of a broad general sense about how I feel about it. I think there's a lot of valid concern. I mean, people,
Okay.
yeah, it totally makes sense. I was telling somebody, here's a deal, and this happens. This is not like unique to WordPress or unique to probably even open source. It's probably just society in general. But the thing is that whenever something like this starts to raise its head in a community, there are some very smart people that come in and put out some really hard thinking, um, well thought ideas down. They say, hey, this is that. But when people start putting all those ideas down, then you've got this fringe group that has to pull out all the little details, and they make the drama. So
Yep.
so they are these like little echo chambers of, oh, you said this, well, what does this mean? And then their little group all discusses it, and then it becomes, the so-called drama. So, and that, it's hard, you can't get away from that, but it's a shame sometimes because some of this conversation could really result in some valid ways of doing this down the road. But if only those people would say, okay, let's let the thinkers kind of think about this. Let's get to a point, but it gets to the point where everybody has an opinion and it just becomes blown up. And then, you have all this conversation and everybody's arguing, and it's a community, and the community should be involved with it. And that all makes sense. But it's like, let some of these people really work this through, the people that are very genuinely serious about it, and they're not doing this or getting involved with this just to get involved with it and be part of the so-called controversy.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100%. And then the second thing I wanted to touch about, and you've sort of hit on it already, is the WordPress community. And listeners of this show know I've been on a community tear for months, and it kind of started back when Paul Lacey and I sat down about 4 or 5 months ago, and we talked about acquisitions, and that turned into a community discussion. Then I was privileged and pleased to have a discussion with Brian Gardner that we were talking about the future of WordPress, and that turned into a community discussion. And then in the midst of all this, I've kind of taken on co-admin duties to a LinkedIn group with Courtney Robertson, and that's turned into about community. And Bob, frankly, you're all about community as well. So how do you feel about our community and where we stand right now?
I think what we got to really look at is, as much as we want to cohesively pull together the community, we sometimes I think we say that and then we think, well, have we even defined what the community is? Is a
Yeah.
community this group? I mean, we were talking about this before the show, and I talked about this with Andrea Middleton, like I bet like 8 years ago. We were talking about the community, and we were talking about all the sub sectors of the community, because you have the WordPress community, then you have almost a community of naysayers, and then you have the community around products, you have the community around influencers, and all of them have little unwritten rules of what they believe their community and how they kind of run their little community. It's not like some formal whatever, but it's unspoken. And so all of that stuff mingles in the bigger community, and we look at it and we think, oh, it's all segmented, it's all crazy. Well, it's a world. It's kind of like, we're kind of a microcosm of the actual world, where you've got all these people in there doing it. And I think what my how I've always approached the WordPress community is, I do my thing. I probably touch a lot of these different communities in different ways. Some of them I may be involved with more or less within WordPress, but I organically have my own beliefs, this is what I think of the community. This is what I think of the people. This is what I think of everything around it. And I do the best I can myself to generate whatever I can, feelings and goodness and thoughts around it as I can. And that's really the most I think all of us can do. And we're going to collectively, and we have already started to kind of attract each other, to certain segments of the community. And it is going to be a little broken up in that sense. But if, I think there's more and more, if we really look at the big picture, there's a lot of people that, I'm tired of this, or I'm tired of WordPress this. But when you start asking them about WordPress, well, I love WordPress and I love parts of the community. So, there's a lot going on. And I think that we just, I think it's, if we step back and we say, well, this community's really screwed up, if you just look at other things going on, other communities. However, I think WordPress is actually pretty solid as a community compared to a lot of, other communities, non-technical, whatever that I see. And I think there's a lot of valuable people in there. And yeah, you got the naysayers, you got the big mouths, you got the egos, you got everything else, just like any other normal community.
No, I would agree with you. And there's always going to be a few naysayers or a few people that just take the opposite track sometimes. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that's just the reality of it all. I mean, people are human, but I think what we need to do is honestly keep building the community with where the majority wants to go, and we'll keep going. And I've said this to you and several other people. Let's stop blaming the issues on the table and start to look at the people involved and say that's where the issues are. Not the fact that we have multiple issues of everything from Gutenberg to page builders to FSE to React to the API. I mean, there's always going to be issues there. It's how we deal with those issues. And to me, that's the bigger thing. The only thing I have to tell you, and I said this in your State of the Word podcast kind of look back at, is the only thing that disappointed me was the only thing that got touched on in State of the Word was Five for the Future, which I think a lot of us do. And I think personally, I think there should have been a broader scope on the community, but that's, just my personal opinion at that point. Okay.
Yeah. And it's tough to think of, when you think of all the different stuff I described, all these communities, for any leadership at any level to really try to put a ton of effort in it, because so much of it it can't fall on one person, a handful of person, or even a company. It's just so huge. And this community, I mean, however you define it, except if you have a little tiny community you hang out in, it's huge. It's huge.
Yep.
And I think that's a cool part of it too. I like it because I like diverse opinions. I like, I listen to who I want to listen to. And if somebody bugs me, I tune them out. I don't say, oh, you don't belong in this community. I just don't settle into what they're saying and focus on it.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know the resources the community brings. And I'll give you an example of that. Last week, I posted something from HeroPress in a LinkedIn group, and somebody I know is very prominent on LinkedIn and not as much on Twitter came back to me and said, I haven't heard of HeroPress before. And I mean, we all know Topher and Kate do an amazing job up there. And I was just so shocked to say, you've been around WordPress this long and you haven't heard about HeroPress? Like it was, I don't know, it just caught me off guard. So that's how big our community is. Sometimes people don't know what's being done or how it's being done. And that is a big issue too, frankly.
And, for me, my goal for this year for Do the Woo is awareness, bringing awareness to more WooCommerce people. And I so get this. I mean, I have a couple people that joke around with me and say, oh, I met somebody and they don't know who Bobwp is. I was amazed. I'm like, oh, come on now, but it is, it's awareness is tough for even us that feel like we've, been in the community and done a lot of stuff and produces content or whatever. And HeroPress is a good example of that. Myself, when you sit down and I'm starting to do some research and evaluate this and figure out how can I bring more awareness to Do the Woo. It's a tough road. It's not simple. And it's like you said, it's the massive what we have in this community. And yeah, it's how we get that out. And, I wish there was some, and maybe by the year's end, I'll have a little insight to it. I might not have the magic bullet, but I will, maybe have something that because I plan on talking to some people and getting into this more and more, and maybe I'll have a little bit of enlightening on that or something. But it is a huge community.
No, I agree with you. Thanks for joining me today, Bob. I think if people want to know more about WooCommerce, they need to check out your Do the Woo podcast. It's kind of my go-to source for Woo information. You have a bunch of amazing co-hosts, and they add to the show greatly. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, how's the best way?
Best way is Do the Woo at Do the Woo on Twitter, dothewoo.io, and I'm very active on WordPress, WooCommerce, and Post Status Slack. So you can always DM me there too. So I'm and my Twitter open DMs. So reach out. I'm always happy to talk with you.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Thanks for joining me. Have an amazing day.
Thank you, Rob. This was great.
Thank you. A very special thank you to my good friend Bob Dunn, Bobwp, for joining me on episode 200 of the STM show. Thank you, Bob. Woo! Thank you for listening to this edition of the STM show. The STM show is brought to you by Rob Cairns and Stunning Digital Marketing. For more information about Rob Cairns and Stunning Digital Marketing, go to stunningdigitalmarketing.info. From here, you can connect to us on social media, go to our website, and even go to the podcast to subscribe. This podcast is dedicated to my late father, Bruce Cairns. Dad, I miss you very much. Keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the stars. Make your business succeed.